So good morning and welcome to our webinar. This is going to be a webinar all about the program called Funding to Support Secondments with Application in the Biomedical Services. My name is Anita Omabuzi. I'm the event manager at KTN. I'm going to introduce you to our speakers who are going to be speaking to you. So Stephen, if you can move on to the next slide. Matt Lodge, who is the Programme Director at UKRI, Stephen McComb, who's our Knowledge Transfer Advisor at KTN, and Ewan Nicholas at UKRI, who is going to also be taking your Q&A questions and answers. I will hand over to Matt Lodge, who is going to introduce the webinar and talk to you about what's going to be covered. Thank you.
Thank you. So today we're going to cover, first of all, an overview of the programme, which I'll present momentarily. And then I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who's going to talk a little bit about how the KTN can support companies in applying. And then finally, Ewan's going to help us out with a Q&A at the end of today's webinar. And the next slide, please. Thank you. So first of all, let's run through the core objective. So what are we trying to do with innovation scholars? Well, I suppose the primary driver is to create porosity between sectors by enabling career mobility. So allowing people from different working environments, whether it be academia, the NHS, other public sector bodies, or business and industry, to move between those types of organisation and thereby enhance their career and, as it says in the second point, boost their skills knowledge as well. Obviously, like all UK research and innovation schemes, we also hope to intensify knowledge exchange and add value to the research and development community and the UK economy. And here, that is focused initially, as this is a trial and a first call of the Innovation Scholars programme. We hope to, sorry, I think you've skipped ahead a little bit too quick for me there. Yeah, we're trialling it in biomedical sciences. Next slide, thank you. Your project must boost skills and knowledge and career development of people, and you must articulate this in the proposal documentation. You also should have or articulate how you will have a long-standing effect on organisations that can be linked to the movement of people. The secondee must spend their time in the host organisation on activities that work towards solving challenges or problems within the host organisation. I think one important thing to point out here in the blue box in the corner is that the secondment can be for a person at any stage of their career. It's not focused at early career, it's not focused at established career, it's focused at any career stage. In addition, your project can address one or more of the following: intensifying knowledge and exchange between the biomedical industry and academia, adding value to the biomedical sciences sector and the UK economy by increasing productivity. The focus of this call is very much on the secondee and the development they gain for working to the benefit of the host organisation. And these are the two primary things that you will have to get across in your proposal submission. Next slide. So, eligibility criteria. So in order to be eligible, obviously these are divided up by the eligibility for the various different elements of an application. So the host organisation is the organisation that will receive the secondee. And within the application, you must apply as a non-grant claiming partner. So that's Innovate UK terminology for how you must add your organisation to the proposal system. You must propose a placement within a single host organisation. There can only be one placement and one host organisation in an application, and explain the benefit for the host organisation and the secondee. From the point of view of the seconding organisation, they will lead the application and claim the grant, so they will be in receipt of the funding. They must be research and innovation active, and they must have a bank account in the UK. The secondee must be resident in the UK, must be employed by their organisation, the seconding organisation, for the duration of the proposed project, and they must be named, if they're not the applicants, within the application. Either the host or seconding application must be a business in the biomedical sciences sector. So one of the two organisations applying must be a business. Up to £300,000 is available per secondment, but any value that's reasonable that is less than that is perfectly acceptable. And finally, a specific note on project length. One of the things that's unique about this scheme, we think, is that when we say up to 36 months flexibly, we really do mean flexibly. It can be 1 day a week over 3 years. It can be 2 intense periods of secondment of a month each in a 1 year period. You can use the flexibility part-time or full-time anywhere between 1 and 36 months in any range of part-time or full-time working, providing you stay within that £300,000 budget and providing your project time does not extend over 36 months. Next slide, please. So just a standard UKRI slide here, covering off the types of organisation that will fund through this scheme. So we'll fund any type of business, small, micro, medium or large, according to the European Union definition. You must be registered in the UK. We'll fund research organisations, including universities, non-profit distributing research technology organisations, including the catapults, public sector research establishments and research council institutes. We'll also fund public sector organisations and charities that are undertaking research activity. And for this call, importantly, that includes the NHS, obviously. If you want further information on the EU definition of a business, you can find it at the link below on this slide, and we will be distributing the slides after the webinar so that you can go and have a look at the links. If you are a 100% owned by a large parent company as a small subsidiary, this means by EU rules you are classed as a large company and will only be entitled to the relevant level of funding. Next slide. So moving now on to grant percentage rates. So we are allowing fundamental research in this call. And if you're undertaking fundamental research, 100% of the eligible costs will be available. However, we're anticipating that most of the submissions we get will fall into the technical feasibility studies and industrial research category and experimental design, where funding will be available to companies at the rates shown in the box. And this is a result of state aid legislation, which we'll come to later and handle in the Q&A. Obviously, research organisations undertaking non-economic activity and public sector organisations or charities may be eligible to receive 100% of the costs. Thank you. Next slide. So the application questions, of which there are 5, essentially align directly with the assessment criteria. So you will only be assessed on these 5 questions here. Remember that the primary focus on this call is the benefit to the secondee and the challenges in the host organisation that they're addressing. And those are covered by questions 1 and 2 respectively. Question 2 also requires you to upload an annex, an appendix, sorry, and this is the curriculum vitae, a 2-page curriculum vitae for the secondee. And we've included this just to make it a little bit easier for you to articulate how the experience of the secondee aligns to the challenges that you're trying to achieve. Question 3, the environment, focuses on the suitability of the environment of the host organisation and what they're hoping to achieve. Question 4, the impact, talks about the benefits that the project will have to the participants and the broader impact that it may have on the UK economy, for example, or on the welfare or health of individuals, people. And then finally, question 5 focuses on the resources, the plan, costs, and any mitigation. And further information on those application questions can be found within the call documentation. So moving on to some key dates, the competition opened back on the 31st of January 2020, and the submission deadline for proposals is the 1st of July 2020 at noon. Applicants will be informed of a decision on the 4th of September, and thereafter they will have up to 6 months to start their proposal. This is an extension to Innovate UK's normal rule of 3 months, and we've done this because of the current uncertainty caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. I should also point out at this point that if applicants have research proposals that to this call that directly or in some circumstances indirectly address COVID-19 related applications, they can be fast-tracked and funded before the 4th of September. If you feel that you have a proposal that meets these criteria, you should contact us on the email address that will be provided at the end of the presentation. I'll now hand over to Stephen, who'll talk to you a little bit about how the KTN can support companies in applying.
Thank you, Matt. So what has happened is that UKRI has been working with KTN to try and understand the implications of the call and try and understand how it could be useful for businesses. So the next number of slides are really about trying to draw out what is the essence of the call, what's it trying to achieve, but also how can a company and the university or NHS make best benefit of it. So it's around that sort of concept of making use of the call. So the first thing, just to go through, and some of these will reiterate some of the points really from Matt, but whenever you're looking at trying to understand how you will apply for this, the focus is really on the seconding organisation receiving the funding. The funding tends to be around replacing the lost salary and costs linked to the travel or subsistence of the person who is the secondee. Just to draw out a point which comes out in a number of the questions which you have previously submitted, it does not cover things like materials maybe used in a lab. It doesn't cover anything to do with equipment. It doesn't cover areas beyond the person, and that's slightly dissimilar to other competitions. So just to draw out that, it's very much focused on the salary of the secondee. The secondee remains in the employment of the seconding organisation. Again, a point requested in a number of the questions. And the amount of funds received depends on whether the company is economically active, the size of the organisation, and around the type of activity taking place within the actual application. These are some of the points that Matt mentioned a second ago, but it's just trying to draw out that emphasis that you need to look at the detail of who you are as an organisation, what you're applying for, and the size of the company to make an assessment as to how much funding can be received. Again, drawing out a couple of points which are important to a number of the companies and organisations we've talked to. NHS is available or can be used in this as part of this secondment, and in particular in some of the COVID conversations, it may be appropriate to second somebody out of the NHS or into the NHS, which may be a very valuable way of approaching this. It doesn't have to be specifically COVID, but that option is quite unusual compared to some of the other funds, and it's worth just drawing that out. Within that, so when you're looking at the funding element of it, it's unlikely that the NHS or the academic institution will gain a market advantage. Therefore, the focus is really on understanding the market advantage for the company. In regard to that, it may be that the company may have to pay a percentage of the funding to the university or the NHS as part of the state aid agreement, once you figure out which type of project you're looking at. And just to draw out sort of the area that a business can gain economic advantage irrespective of if the monies are being directly provided from UKRI to the company or to the NHS or university. The duration of the actual project is irrelevant about the funds, and that it doesn't sort of give you an advantage to go longer or shorter. It's really about what money is required to support that. Taken through a number of scenarios, just be aware that these are not covering every particular angle. They're really just to help you to understand and think through how you could possibly use the funding and how you could draw advantage for your collaboration. So the first example I'm putting up is around a university professor, perhaps being seconded to a small company, a micro company who's trying to scale up their business. It may be that that person is providing support 1 day a week for 6 months during a particular part of the company's growth. That may be appropriate if it's a biomedical company. So in this case, the host organization is going to be the small company. Or small and medium-sized organization. The seconding organization is going to be the university. In this particular example, we've specifically said about a feasibility project, just so you can get a flavor of trying to understand the funds. But if it was a feasibility project and it was an SME, in that case, the university is going to receive 60% of the eligible costs, and the SME would be then responsible for the 40% paid back into the university. The applicant who is leading this is going to be the university, who will apply on the IFS system, but they will also record on the JES system, which the academics will be familiar with. The second example, again, just trying to draw a slightly different one, is where a commercial R&D expert is seconded back into the university labs for maybe a period of 3 months to work on some piece of equipment or some particular piece of data or something which is relevant to the collaboration. So the company is sending the person into the university. The university is the host organization. The sending organization is the SME. Again, I'm going to stick with the feasibility project. So in this case, the company is directly receiving 60% of the eligible cost. The SME is making the application through IFS, which you'll get on all, which you'll find links to on the call details. The third scenario, just again going slightly to the left of that, so you get a collection of different ideas, is where a commercial diagnostic expert, so a company person, is moved to the NHS, seconded to the NHS labs for 2 days a week to study lab data. So the NHS in this case has specific data which is of relevance to the company. The NHS sees value in partnering with the company to try and understand that data in a different way. In this case, again, the seconding organization is the SME. I've tied in a feasibility project so you can compare the costs, but the SME is making the application in that case. So that's 3 different examples of the type of thing that can happen. A more junior person, a more senior person, using university, using the NHS. Those are all possible options, but they're not limited to those only as being the only options. So again, trying to draw out some of the am I eligible question. There must be a biomedical company. Okay, and we'll keep emphasizing this because quite a number of the questions asked around, if I am an academic, can I apply on my own? Can I do a solo thing? And really the competition's purpose is around about the sharing of ideas and knowledge, and that sort of misses the point of the competition. Again, just drawing that point that seniority is not relevant any career stage. So again, in our conversations with companies, we find that the people assumed that the person was a recent graduate, or similar to a KTP, was maybe in a couple of years from graduating. So we're saying that's not the case. It's more about the knowledge and information being shared and the person's career development at any stage. And just again, to emphasize that point, that there can be new partner opportunities. It may be a catapult, it may be NHS, it may be another public body. Again, that's just something which is worth highlighting. Trying to take through a number of the company eligibility, and you'll find I keep repeating one point through this, but an example maybe of a blood pressure monitoring manufacturer, they're likely to be eligible because they are likely to be a biomedical company. So it's a very clear line from biomedical company here is somebody who's be eligible. Second point, sort of going slightly to the left of that, where it's a data company looking at sentiment analysis on a sentiment analysis platform to understand why people take their medication. So you see we're starting to play in the medication and biomedicals, but the key question for the assessors is this a biomedical company? And really the onus is with the applicant to prove that they're a biomedical company and it's not a data company which happens to have a particular line of attack in a medical area. Again, just to draw out one point in the middle of this is that the seconding a behavior expert from university into a biomedical company may also be relevant. So we're not limiting sort of the types of skills. It may be skills which are not specifically biomedical, but they are advancing the biomedical company. That's okay as well. So it can be a diversity of skills or experience from lots of different areas, which will be within the eligibility. Third example about radio frequency test capability for a semiconductor provider linked to medical devices. Again, the key question is about, is this a medical company, biomedical company, and the applicant needs to prove that. Fourth example, an academic team has built some sort of a sensor for measuring drug resistance. So obviously it's in the biomedical area, but there's no evidence of a company in this case. So because there's no biomedical company, it's likely to be out of scope, even if they have some intention in the future that it might be a future startup. So it really is pushing back to this, is it a biomedical company? Fifth point, seconding a professor to a university spin out where they're a founder. This comes up in a number of the questions, and really we're sort of pushing back slightly to say that there may be a conflict of interest and there may be limited additionality for the knowledge exchange because the professor is likely to be already engaged with that company and likely to be already sharing their skills. So conflict of interest and limited additionality to the knowledge exchange is likely to make it ineligible. The last point, about an NHS lab secondment to a local university. Again, going back to the point, no biomedical company is involved in this, therefore it's likely to be out of scope. So NHS and university may create something fantastic and interest, but it's not within the scope of this project. We need the biomedical company. Again, just trying to highlight some of the project considerations. Really, this is about staff focus. So again, the point it really is that other equipment beyond the staff is probably not within the scope of this competition, and between the collaborations, you're going to have to fund that internally. It is very much about the knowledge exchange. So there is this possibility beyond the biomedical focus. That might be about behavior, it may be about analysis, it may be about data manipulation. It can go very wide about the knowledge exchange. And then the last point really is around the economic benefit. So this Comet may be a platform that leads to future benefits rather than its purpose. So you have to be a little bit shrewd as a company or a collaboration applying to say, right, well, we could get a benefit of understanding something within this funding, which may in the future lead separately to an economic benefit. So perhaps I can word my application in a way which defines the initial exploration within this funding, and then perhaps there's separately another application for something else or an internal fund which takes it further along the economic path. That would give you an option to look at whether or not it's a feasibility study or industrial research or experimental. And you'll note from the earlier slides where you fit within that, those definitions will determine how much funding can be provided to the company. So really look at the definitions of what a feasibility study is, what is experimental, and understand what you're asking for, because that's what the assessors will have to make their judgment based on. So be careful and understand what you're submitting. Some scenarios about the projects: creation of a cloud-based data store for biopsy using analytic techniques. The key question really from the assessors is what benefit are all of the parties getting, because we're going to want to see some sort of a benefit for both sets of the parties, and also we're going to look for what's the impact from this engagement. So what's really going to be driven out of this new engagement? Second question really around academic team and company have distinct data sets of similar diseases in different geographies, and sharing and analysing the data in a collaboration is likely to create some additional benefits. So it is a very interesting project, does look very relevant, does apply in the biomedical, and we're going to ask the question about, well, where's the collaborative agreement on the potential IP? So have the companies came together and came to some sort of an agreement to say, we can get on in the future, here's how we're going to separate any insights or IP, or here's the agreement about what this looks like. So those collaborative agreements are going to be important to prove evidence that it can be workable. Third example, diagnostic company has a pre-market test that may be relevant to COVID-19 symptom screening. The NHS would like to work with the company to assess the sensitivity and specificity of the test. Sounds very relevant, sounds very focused on the biomedical area. Careful attention needs to be paid to the collaborative agreement, make sure that's in place, and there's a clear argument needed on the level of benefits and impacts for both parties. So not just benefiting the NHS in this example, but there would need to be a balance to say there's a commercial advantage to doing this as well. So potential to get a decision on funding before the closure date, just highlighting that point that Matt made earlier on, that if it's COVID related, there is a fast track, and please get in contact with the Innovation Scholars team who will be able to advise on whether it's appropriate for that. So I'm now going to pass over to Ewan, who's going to talk through a number of the emerging questions.
Great, thank you very much, Stephen. So as Stephen said, we're now moving on to the section where we're going to answer some of your questions. In a few moments, I'll pose some of those that you've been submitting throughout the presentations today to Matt. You can continue asking those questions, and I will be reading through them rapidly as we go through. If you submitted a question when you registered for this, thank you very much. We have read all of those questions. We hope we have addressed a large proportion of them in the 2 presentations that you just heard. There are still a few that are outstanding that hopefully I can give you a short answer to now. So first, we had a number of questions in relation to COVID-19 and the kind of ongoing pandemic and lockdown. Your application should try to recognise any likely restrictions. So for instance, if you think it's likely that your secondee would need to work from home, you just need to address that within the application and demonstrate that that's suitable for the outcomes of the project that you're trying to work. It's worth saying that these projects don't have to start until March 2021, so there's a good deal of flexibility there. The second bullet point on this list, the application should balance personal development of the secondee and the outcome for the partners. Both are important. No program level support is provided for the secondee by the innovation scholars. This is the responsibility of the host and of the seconding organisation. Equally, there's no specific matchmaking provided by either UKRI or IUK for this competition. We've had a number of questions asking us what the success rate is for this competition. It's new, it's a pilot. I'm afraid we don't know yet. Both early work and fundamental research is eligible. The requirement for university or company agreement, we've had a number of questions. In fact, there was one in the live question from Damien asking whether we need to engage with the university, whether you need to have had engagement with the university for your application. Yes, you do. They do need to have responded. And can one organisation submit multiple applications? Yes, that is acceptable. So we are now going to move on to responding to some of those questions in the live feed. We are going to get through as many as possible. If we don't get to your question, we'll try and send a summary of the outstanding questions around registrants when we also circulate this webinar. Also worth saying, there is lots of information on ukri.org under research and then funding opportunities. There's also a link there to the full call documentation on the Innovation Funding Service. If you haven't looked at those 2 things already, then I would encourage you to do so. So first of all, we've had a few questions about eligibility. Fiona asks, are there any criteria about how long you have to have worked for the company prior to secondment? Are there any limitations on job titles or experience level? Matt.
So the answer to that's a very simple one, and I'm sure many of you will be pleased to hear that it's a no. There are no restrictions. So as an example, or a couple of examples, just to make things easier, if we were to have a researcher from a university, a fully employed but non-tenured postdoc or URF, for example, who wanted to gain some experience of spinning out their research or developing a product, and they were to go into a company environment and help them with a product development cycle to obtain that knowledge, as long as it was a biomedical sciences company, that would be acceptable. Conversely, it would also be acceptable for someone who was, for example, a late career technical specialist within a company environment who maybe didn't have a research degree or a research background to second into a university lab through this scheme on a part-time basis to develop experimental and research skills so that they could go back to their company and apply that knowledge to their company's benefit in a more research-focused role. So we really aren't focusing this on late career or early career research professionals. It could be any career stage and any technical ability. The important thing is that in your proposal, you articulate the suitability of the secondee to undertake the proposed work.
Great, thank you, Matt. So the next question, we have a couple of questions that one here from someone anonymous says, I'm involved with a spin-off from a Scottish university. Could we second a member of staff to the spin-off as part of the programme? Okay, so there are two different
things here to talk about. So the first is conflict. So there is an issue within Innovate UK funding companies if there is a conflict of interest in that funding. So for example, if we're funding someone who has a financial interest, so for example, a shareholding or a partial ownership of the company into the company, that can present a problem. The other thing here is around seconding people from a university, for example, a university environment, into an organisation that they are already engaged with and already work part-time for. So for example, a chief technical officer who has spun out a successful startup from a university and wants to spend more of their time working for a startup. Now these two examples, that last example, sorry, would probably not be accepted. And the reason why it wouldn't be accepted is because it's something that's already happening. And so we can't release public funding to make it happen. But if you have a specific case, because these things can be quite complicated, if you have a specific case where you have a startup that you're already engaged with some way, then I would encourage you to contact us to discuss it.
Great, thank you. So the next question, Stephen, you might want to chip in on this too. We've had a couple of questions about what support is available. So Drew asks whether a draft of the application can be sent to someone at the KTN to check before it's submitted. And Ella also asks, how do you support seconding organisations to partner or collaborate with academic organisations?
So the KTN is already engaged with quite a number of the companies on this call. So continue to use the contacts that you have within KTN, and if anybody has sort of specific requirements, you can sort of mail through to myself, and I'll try to connect through into the relevant people in either the area locality or else on the technical sort of area that you're specific about. So I'm happy that if people contact me through the KTN website, I can link them to other people who may be able to support them. There isn't any specific detailed knowledge of this application, so just be careful that the main information is going to be through the website, which Matt has highlighted earlier on and will be issued after the webinar has closed. So some support, but not fully.
It's also worth pointing out at this stage that there's nothing stopping you, if you're thinking of creating an application, just creating an account with the Innovation Funding Service if you don't already have one, clicking on the apply to this call button and just having a look through the form. You can do that, and there is a lot of further information, particularly on the supporting questions and what you should address, contained within the IFS system. So if you haven't done so already, it's worth you just creating an account or logging into one if you already have it and taking a look at the form.
Yeah. The other point probably to draw, some people are trying to compare this with other applications from the companies. This is one of the lighter touch applications of all of the types of competitions, so it should be reasonably self-explanatory, and so the details Matt's provided are good, so this should be easier to apply for if you've got a clear and good idea.
A question from Yolanda now. Will this program only support collaboration with small and medium enterprises? Can large firms be involved?
Certainly large firms can be involved. Another thing that it's probably worth pointing out at this point is that within this scheme, there is nothing stopping cross-business interaction. So both partners could be businesses of any size. So, for example, you could have someone from a business that specialises in big data analytics going into a biomedical sector company, or vice versa. Just remember that, as we've said on many occasions during the presentation today, that one of the businesses must be in the biomedical sciences sector.
And that seems like a good point to ask the question by Daniel. What is a biomedical company? How are we defining it?
So we're defining it in the broadest possible sense of the word. So it could mean anything from big pharma, but it could also mean a therapeutics company. It could also mean a company that develops or is involved in the production of medical technology or medical devices. I suppose when we get companies that have complex and mixed portfolios of work, we'd expect a case to be made within the protocol documentation of how the biomedical sciences business operates within biomedical sciences, and that it is its primary or one of its primary business concerns. But if you have any doubts about whether your business is a biomedical sciences business, or whether we would call it or classify it as a biomedical sciences business and eligible for the call, please do get in touch with us. Another thing that I should say at this point is that when we're talking about biomedical sciences, we are talking about biomedical sciences as a human biology and human medicine sense. We're not talking about animal, plant sciences and food.
Thank you. So we've had a couple of questions about costs and what costs are eligible. So one here which says, did you say a grant only pays salary, travel and subsistence, and this particular project involves £80,000 of reagents and mass spectrometry. Are these costs allowed? There's also a question from Drew saying, is there a table which sets out which costs are acceptable?
Sorry, I'll answer both of those. So I'm afraid, Drew, there isn't a table. And the reason why there isn't a table is basically because it's just far too simple to put in a table, and that the first questioner was absolutely and totally spot on the money. This call only pays direct salary costs, or what you might call on cost in the business world. So salary, tax, national insurance, and any superannuation, not including bonuses. And it also pays travel and subsistence costs. You can apply for no other funding through this call. It is literally just direct salary, travel and subsistence. That is all it will pay for. Now, obviously, we recognise the fact that this means these grants are not fully economically costed. There will be costs that are contributed by possibly the seconding organisation and almost certainly the host organisation in supporting the activity. And we ask that these costs are recorded in the answer to question 5. And the reason why we do this is so that we have some comprehension of how much money the research and development community is contributing to our call as a participant.
And so a related question then from Greg, who says, can the secondee use facilities in the seconding organisation for part of the project? For example, a university researcher is seconded to a company, but they are specific testing capabilities at the university.
So I don't see why not, but I think you have to be careful about what proportion of the obviously the secondment, and the purpose of the secondment is that it's taking place with a host organisation, and that the secondee is gaining skills and career development by working with a different organisation And I suppose we'd expect naturally that to be in a different environment, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I just think in the case you articulate when you're talking about doing some of the work within a university environment where you're already or normally employed, you have to be careful to articulate how you as a secondee would benefit from that, and how the company would benefit and how the university would benefit.
And so a related question here from Ash, can we add in-kind contribution cost to the total cost?
So you can add in-kind contributions. As I've said, if you're going to put in-kind contribution costs into the proposal as a record of what you as an organisation have contributed to the programme, please put this as part of your answer to question 5 when you're detailing project costs and justification. Please don't add it to the finance form.
A question now about intellectual property, everyone's favourite subject. Ella says, if a seconding organisation or a SME partners with an academic institution and an innovation is developed, who will own the IP and can the SME exploit the innovation commercially?
So this is really up to you and the university to decide. I know that's probably not the answer you wanted, but UKRI is agnostic in terms of, but this particular call, I should say, because we're not always agnostic, is agnostic on IP. What you need to bear in mind, though, is obviously as an SME, you're a business operating within a market. And so favourable terms on IP could make your award state aidable under general block exemption regulation. If you want some more information on that, you can call us and talk to us. But what we might be more beneficial is if you're from a business talking to legal representation that has an understanding of the relevant EU legislation, or if you're in a university environment talking to your research office, who should be able to provide you with advice. Either way, it is between the partners to decide on IP and how they will share any IP or knowledge outcomes of the proposed work. And you need to agree this in an agreement which must be uploaded as part of your answer to question 5. And this is an attachment, but it only has to be a draft agreement. It doesn't have to be finalised.
Thanks. So a question now on from Craig Watkins, who says, can the hosting company charity be in a developing country? And perhaps you could expand a little bit on kind of what the international eligibility is for this pilot.
So I'm afraid the international eligibility on this particular call is that there isn't any international eligibility. Work has to take place predominantly in the UK. We will consider some international travel. If, for example, a company has a primary UK R&D site, for example, a large pharmaceutical company that has a site in the UK, but also has a site in another company, and a small portion of the work needs to be done in that lab, we'd consider funding some international travel. But as a general rule on this call, the work needs to take place in the UK, and any business engaged has to have a UK-based R&D presence, and universities and other organisations must be situated within the United Kingdom. Thanks.
A question here, we've got a few more questions about eligibility and a few about filling in the form, so we'll try and work through some of those. So would a secondee receive funding if they are currently in a role within a university, but their current contract is short-term and ends within 6 months?
So if your current contract ends within 6 months, you would have to have a contract extension to enable you to apply. So unlike, for example, a knowledge transfer partnership, this scheme is not intended to be the sole source of income for a researcher or any other individual. So in order to apply, you must be normally employed at the organisation you're seconding from for the full duration of the project.
And so similarly, Lorraine Kerr asks, the secondee needs to be employed by the seconding organisation. Are there more detail on this at the application date, grant start date?
So the application obviously needs to get to us before the 1st of July. We will announce the grants or make decisions on who's been successful by the 4th of September. After that, it's up to you when you start your research proposal, but you can start it any time between as quickly as possible after the 4th, although these things do sometimes take a little time, and the 4th of March 2021. Obviously, from that point, your grant will run its proposed duration from the start date. So if you start it on the 31st of, if you start it on the 4th of March, it will finish on the 3rd of March a year later if it's a year-long project.
A few more on eligibility. So can a university work with the NHS?
Unfortunately, on this call, they can't because the NHS does not count as a business. It's a publicly funded organisation. So such an application would be ineligible for this call, as it would not meet the criterion of involving a biomedical sciences sector business.
What about a company wanting to apply their technologies to biomedical field? Would they count?
So if you had a company who's wanting to apply their technology to biomedical fields, they would need to engage with a biomedical sciences business unless they could demonstrate that their technology already had an established application in biomedical sciences, I would say. However, this is quite a complicated one. So I encourage you to drop an email to us at the email at the end of the presentation, and we'll help you further, because it's with these sort of subtle questions, it's sometimes better to be specific rather than general.
Can an application support more than one person, i.e. a PDRA, secondee, and also some time for a senior academic?
No, that's not possible in this call. It's just a secondee. So we appreciate the fact that in a corporate environment, the secondee may be maybe not a senior member of the company, and that there may be a senior member of the company who's responsible for supervision or management of their work. And likewise, we appreciate the fact that in a university environment, the secondee may be a junior member of lecturing staff or a postdoc on a long contract, and that they may also have a supervisory member of staff. In this call, unfortunately, we'd expect those supervisory persons to undertake their work uncosted on the grant, and the secondee would get their salary for time that they'd spent on the work refunded to the seconding organisation.
Thanks. A few questions related to COVID-19. Someone here saying the majority of potential hosts involved in COVID-19, the majority of potential hosts are currently involved in COVID-19 support and response directly. Is there anything UKRI can do to help applicants where the focus on COVID-19 means that the applicant won't meet the deadline?
Yeah, so if the work is COVID-19, if you have potential work which is COVID-19 related, what we suggest you do is email us at your earliest possible convenience to discuss what you want to do as part of your secondment. If we feel that it does directly address COVID-19, what we then suggest you do is, as quickly as you can, put in as strong a proposal as you possibly can and submit it. Don't wait for the deadline, don't wait for the 1st of July, just submit the proposal. If we've agreed to potentially fast track it, we will then fast track the review of your proposal. I will have it assessed, and we will then make a funding decision. Okay, and we will effectively fast track that proposal through the system. But you shouldn't just do this off the cuff. If you do believe you have a COVID-19 related project, you need to contact us and discuss it first.
Will the programme encourage a tripartite partnership between a university, a company and the NHS to undertake a feasibility into development?
Again, unfortunately, this is something that I've been asked by email quite a lot, and unfortunately, and I do say unfortunately because I'll be honest, this is something that we didn't anticipate, and we can see the value in it, but unfortunately, on this particular call, it would not meet the criteria. We can only have one seconded individual on the grant. If you can make the project work with one of the organisations being effectively a silent partner, i.e. a collaborator who's not on the grant and not receiving funds, then so be it. But these proposals can only consider a secondee going from a seconding organisation to a host organisation. Or I should say there may be future rounds of this and things may change in future calls, but in this particular call, those are the criteria. Sorry,
so no, that's okay. We've had a number of questions on that, so thank you for answering that as well. Would contract research organisations be eligible to be the biomedical company?
That's an interesting one, and again, we've had some calls from various innovation hubs and other people. So I think it depends on the specifics of the project, and it depends on you making a case that your primary business is in biomedical sciences. Again, if you have doubts, you can get in touch with us. Be prepared to explain what your business does and how it interacts with the biomedical sciences industry. If we believe there's a strong enough connection between the biomedical sciences research base, we may allow you to apply without a primary business. But I'll be honest, we are genuinely here really looking for businesses that operate in some broad spectrum of the biomedical sciences. But as I said, we are open to be as broad in the definition of what we call the biomedical sciences. So it's worth getting in touch with us.
Thanks. There's a question here that says, the seconding organisation needs to be research and innovation active. What criteria are you using to assess this?
So there aren't really any criteria on research and innovation activity. We're not measuring it in any sense other than what you write in your proposal. So if you think you are research and innovation active and you write a proposal that convinces the assessors that you're research and innovation active, then you're research and innovation active. You should be capable of providing a area that's suitable for the secondee if you're hosting them, and be able to articulate that. And if you're the seconding organisation, you should be able to provide the secondee on their return from a research and innovation environment with something that is relevant to the experience that they've gained. And you need to obviously be able to articulate that in your proposal.
Right. I'm just skimming through the questions now to see if there's any last ones that we should miss before we close the presentation. Just bear with me for one moment. So there's a question here about form filling. Simon asks in question 5, do you want the entire project risks, etc., to be covered in 600 words, or is this only for the collaboration agreement? Can you add more detail for the project elsewhere?
Yeah, you can. I mean, I think what we're after really in this. So obviously research councils, UKRI, have many different schemes, and some of them ask you to write anything up to 12 or 13 pages of text about your project and project plans and risk. We're asking you to write 600 words. So we need to be realistic about what we're asking you to cover in that. And I would say that you need to cover in 600 words worth of detail what it asks you to cover. You need to be pragmatic about it. Cover the major risks and how you will mitigate those major risks. Don't worry too much about covering every base, because we appreciate the fact that you almost certainly won't be able to do that in 600 words. And I should also point out at this point that 600 words should not be a target. We're expecting that some people will be able to answer some questions very simply. Remember, what you're asking for here is £300,000 or up to £300. And again, I'll highlight the word up to £300,000, and a project that could be of any duration. We could be talking about someone applying to spend 1 day a month for a year, or 1 day a month for 3 years, or a couple of periods of 2 weeks over a year's period to undertake a feasibility study, for example, or just gain some experience. So the amount you write and what you write about should be commensurate with the amount of funding you're requesting and the duration of your secondment. Be pragmatic, but if you have any questions that are specific to your application, please do get in touch. And remember, the KTN is there to help.
We'll do 2 last very quick questions. So Simon says virtual organisations. Many biotechs are semi-virtual or virtual. Can the call accommodate this business model?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by virtual and semi-virtual. So I think that's probably one that we best handle offline. If you can give me an email explaining what you mean by a semi-virtual or virtual company, I could take a guess, but I don't want to get it wrong and give you bad information. So if you can let me know, we will, by the way, be circulating offline answers. So it won't just be the sender of that question that gets the answer, I don't think.
And finally, we've had a couple of questions just asking, what is the total value of this call?
So the total value of the call, there are some tweets that have gone out which have underestimated it slightly. I found out yesterday. The total value of this call is 10 million. So we have £10 million to spend on this call.
And I think we will leave the questions there. Apologies if we haven't got to your question. We will review them all and circulate something alongside with the slides that summarises any main themes that we have missed. So I think I'm passing back to what am I doing? Right, so if you want some further information, feel free to contact us at these details so you can see the addresses there, and we'll include those in the follow-up email. Do have a look at the KTN's website. Do have a look at the call documentation. Again, this call is on the Innovation Funding Service, which most of you will be familiar with, but some may not be, which is on gov.uk. There is also a little bit of information on UKRI.org. And I think all that remains for us to say is thank you very much for joining us, Matt, Stephen and Anita, and everyone on the other side of the webinar. And good luck submitting your applications.
Thank you.
Thank you.